Hello, friends. Welcome to Logistics of Logistics Show. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is how FDH Aero is simplifying the aerospace supply chain with my friend Bob Loycano. How's it going, Bob?
Oh, great, Joe. Thank you so much for having me on today.
I'm excited to talk to you about this. Bob, please introduce yourself and your company and where you're calling from today.
Yeah, so Bob Loycano, I'm VP of Supply Chain for FDH Aero. I'm on the hardware side of FDH Aero. FDH Aero is a global aerospace parts distribution company with primarily in electronics, in hardware, and then in consumables, really managing the entire life cycle of the aircraft and all the parts that go into that.
So when you say aerospace, is that aerospace for defense or is it for the commercial that we all fly around?
All of the above, all of the above. We are well positioned with all of those military customers as well as commercial customers. It's pretty much not a customer on this planet that isn't a customer of ours. We deal with everyone out there that is in the aerospace field.
So where is the company based and where are you located?
So the company is based in Commerce, California, right near Los Angeles. And currently today I'm speaking to you from our Las Colinas site, which is right next to Dallas.
Very nice. Very nice. FDH, what does that stand for? Anything?
It does. It stands for Fastener Distribution Hardware. Although we are much more than just fasteners today. About half of the company is electronics and consumables and other things that really we wouldn't consider as fasteners. But we all come together as one family providing one solution to our customers.
Yep. We talked a little bit before we hit the record button. Obviously, there's all sorts of issues with manufacturing in every space right now with tariffs and capacity. And we'll get into all that in a minute. But you guys are buying on behalf of other companies. So you're buying on behalf of an Airbus or a big defense contractor. Why don't they buy direct without you?
So the truth is they do, but they only buy typically items that come in high volumes. So if you think about if you're Boeing and you're putting together this enormous airplane, the ones that are really high value, high volume, you're going to buy those yourself directly from the manufacturers. And then all these other items at the end of what we call that long tail, that's where we come in as a distributor because we'll buy those parts and have them on the shelf, anticipating our customers' demand before they even know they need it. We'll have those on the shelf.
Now, is there an aftermarket piece to your business also?
There absolutely is. Very tricky to try to predict when airplanes are coming in for service, but we work as closely as we can with those overhaul shops to understand what their needs are going to be because the lead times on these parts, surprisingly, is a year or more on even nuts and bolts and rivets. And so we really need to get ahead of knowing what is the demand going to be. And so the trick for us is to be as smart, if not smarter than our customers and understanding what their needs are going to be.
Yeah. And I push me in the shallow end if I go too deep here. I'm from an automotive background, and I remember we would always have in engineering safety parts, and the safety parts would always get a lot more testing. And I won't mention the manufacturer, but I remember being on a project where safety parts were failing and having quality issues at a much higher clip than we expected. And we're like, wait, if the stuff that we test over and over again has issues, not walk home or accidents, but issues, then what is the stuff that doesn't get a safety part certification on it?
We test every batch of parts that come through us.
Because every part on a plane is a safety part.
You have to test every batch of parts. So we know it meets the standards before we'll sell it to our customer. We won't even bring it into our inventory unless it's past quality.
Yeah. So I'm in Michigan and I grew up with everybody's dad at that time seemed to work in automotive. And every 5 miles, there's a fastener shop. Very different types of fasteners. Those are commodities. And I can go to Home Depot and get that. None of the stuff you're selling, I can get at Home Depot.
Yeah, if you want, I'd love to get into what's the difference between an aerospace part and an automotive part, because there are some vast differences. First of all, every aerospace fastener, whether it's a nut or a bolt, is actually a forging. Every one of these is forged, and we do that for strength. But you have a higher strength fastener. But one of the bigger differences is on the threads of a bolt, anything that's externally threaded, we roll thread them. We don't cut the threads. And so by doing that, you end up moving material instead of removing material. And that makes it a much stronger part. We also put a compressive strength underneath the head of every bolt that goes into an airplane. And that keeps that bolt from popping off, the head from popping off. And so these bolts are very strong, up to probably the strongest one we have is around 260,000 pounds per square inch of strength, meaning it'll take 260,000 pounds of strength just to pull this thing apart and make it fail. So we test every batch of parts to make sure that from a strength standpoint, from a durability standpoint, however that part is used in that application, we test for that before we send those out to a customer.
Yep. And it's interesting, talked to the guys from ASCM yesterday, and they were talking about all the different supply chains. And you guys are obviously a supply chain company. But this is the weird thing about logistics and supply chain. When you say supply chain and automotive, that means one thing, high volume. You're going to make millions of vehicles every year. You're not making millions of planes. And even counting the aftermarket, the MRO piece, still not massive volumes, but the criticality of it and the importance of it being right every single time.
And the variety of the parts. So in automotive, you can have one bolt and you're making 1 million of them. But here we've got 500,000 different parts just in stock, ready for whatever airplane or airplane engine that we need to send these off to. So the variety of parts is what's really difficult in our industry.
I just got back. I was in Europe and my plane was a few hours late. And I remember they said, oh, I was in Detroit. And they go, hey, the flight to Amsterdam is going to be late. And I was like, that means I missed my connector in Amsterdam. And I remember somebody was bitching like, darn it. And I was thinking, I never complain when if somebody says the plane needs to be serviced, I want it to be serviced. Planes don't fall from the sky. And there's a reason they don't fall from the sky is because of the way you're talking, Bob.
Yeah, I remember back in my engineering days, we tried very hard never to have a single point of failure, right? You want it, if something fails, 2 other things have to fail in order for something to really fail.
Yeah, there cannot be like, you can't be on your way and you go, there's a really nasty rattling on the plane. No one's ever going to get on a plane again if I hear rattling going on. No, we'll come back. We'll get more into what you guys do and who you serve and all that in a minute. But tell us a little bit about you, Bob. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Some career highlights before you joined the mothership FDH Aero.
Yeah, so I grew up in Boston. So I'm a New England guy. When I was in my senior year of college, I ended up at GE Aircraft Engines, helping them out, and just got the bug, and I loved it. And so when I graduated college, I have a degree in manufacturing engineering, and ended up starting at Pratt& Whitney, making airplane engines. And I was at Pratt & Whitney for 18 years. Early on in my career, I decided to go back to school and get an MBA. And that led me to try out something called supply chain. Because when you're an engineer, you don't think, I'm going to engineering school so I can go buy stuff. That's just not what we do. But it sounded different and it sounded exciting. And I ended up loving it. I ended up being a commodity manager of fasteners, nuts and bolts and rivets. And it all sounded so mundane, but I just loved it. And it turned out that supply chain was just that perfect blend for me of that technical background I had, as well as that business background. And so I never went back to engineering once I got into supply chain. And I stayed at Pratt & Whitney for 18 years. I left there to join Aerospace distribution. And I've been doing this kind of similar role for the last 18 years with now my third company here at FDH Aero. So currently vice president of supply chain at FDH Aero for the hardware division. Responsibilities including leading that team of buying professionals that are buying the aerospace parts for these variety of manufacturers and their sub-tiers that use them, as well as the operators and the overhaul shops that keep that aircraft in service once it starts flying.
Yep. So what made you join FDH Aero? You obviously had options. You could have gone a lot of different places. Why did you join and then stay with FDH?
I could have, but I love the opportunity to come in here and build something great. So when I got here 4 years ago, we were a collection of different distributors that we had a vision to bring them all together. And I thought it was interesting when I got here, we didn't have a whole lot of processes. And yeah, it was an opportunity for me to write it the way it needs to be done on a blank sheet of paper. I didn't inherit someone else's problems of how they were running the organization. We built it from the ground up. And to me, that was exciting to get over here and work with these various companies and bring them in to be one.
Yep. So if you don't mind me asking, how many parts do you guys carry and sell to all of your various aerospace customers?
So I think at last count, it was around 600,000 SKUs that we keep in
Whoa.
stock.
Oh, wait a sec. So there's 600,000 SKUs. And so do you know how many aircrafts that would be?
I No, that I do
Gotta
not
be
know,
thousands.
Joe.
It's got to be thousands.
I don't. What I do know is we probably buy from around, in any given year, between 2,500 and 3,000 suppliers, and we sell to around 6,000 different customers every year.
So you really can't be. I'm putting my automotive hat on. We used to have a whole bunch of companies that were like reps, and they would rep a whole bunch of different companies. You're not a rep firm. You're not representing these
No,
little
no.
manufacturing
In
companies.
fact, it's very important that we remain independent.
Right. You're more of an auditor and a purchasing organization that works on behalf of these large aerospace companies.
Correct. Yes, that's right. That's exactly right.
It's and until probably a few years ago, I didn't even know organizations like yours existed. And the way I found out about it was somebody said, "Our I want to maybe it's Calgary. Is Calgary one of those MR? Do they have one of those MRO shops where they will overhaul a plane?"
Sure. I'm sure there is something there. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is? I should say I mentioned what is MRO?
MRO, maintenance repair organization. So it's the shop that takes the airplane in and then does whatever it needs to be before it can go back into service.
Yep. And I think if you look at other parts of manufacturing, use the term MRO a little differently. I think it's the rags and the oil and the conveyor belt replacements that you need. And typically it's a separate purchasing organization. Sometimes it's an outsourced purchasing organization, but I think you guys are definitely you're a cut above that just because of the nature of what you're buying. You're not buying the MRO organizations buy commodities. You guys aren't buying any commodities over at your place.
Yeah, they're pretty specialized. A lot of what we do, they are OEM designed. So OEM is the original equipment manufacturer. So that's like an Airbus, a Boeing, a Cessna. They design a lot of these parts that we then buy from the manufacturers who are authorized to make those parts for that specific customer.
Yep. So before we hit the record button, we were just talking about some of the big issues. There's been every supply chain has issues these days. I guess they always did. The problem now is we have visibility tools and scorecards. I think we see them a lot more. So what are some of the bigger issues you're facing right now in the aerospace space?
Yeah, for us, our biggest issue is capacity. Trying to get the capacity out of our supply base. Coming out of COVID, a lot of these shops just didn't believe the volumes. And so they were slow to respond. And we're still in a situation where demand is outpacing supply, and that causes lead times to extend, right? And when we have long lead times, that leads to things like aircraft on the ground, or delays, or cancellations, right? Production line stops where they physically send people home because there isn't work to be done on the production line. These severe disruptions throughout the supply chain just have rippling effects throughout the industry.
Yeah, if I built a plane and I have it sitting somewhere, or I bought a plane and I have it sitting somewhere, that's enormous investment going to waste. And it's not getting any better with sitting there either.
There's really no small parts, right? Every part matters. So they can't put a plane together if they don't have this nut or a bolt or a rivet or whatever it is that they need. They need every part. There's a reason for every part. And so our parts are just as important as an engine or a flap or a tail because you need to assemble it somehow.
So I'm in the Rust Belt. I feel like there's all sorts of facilities that are wide open. I can move in there, get the machines, try and hire the people, and start making stuff for FDH Aero.
Yeah, there's a bit of a trick to it, Joe.
I know there's an expertise that is, especially in your business, but is there not enough talent out there to do this? I'm sure there's enough money in the world to do this.
So definitely labor is an issue. We have several suppliers who will flat out tell us they only run one shift because they can't find enough labor to run a second shift. So labor definitely is an issue. We had an aging workforce heading into COVID, and COVID got a lot of them to retire permanently, and that workforce did not come back. So we're definitely struggling from a labor standpoint as well in aircraft hardware.
Yeah, it seems to me also when I'll think about my kids' generation, everybody went off to college. It was like, and the idea that you would go to an apprenticeship program was like, no, I'm college bound. Why would I go do that? Now I think we're starting to see the errors of our way is that we needed to train more people to, and these are good jobs. We're talking, this is skilled trades. This is not, this is a better job than going, I'm not
But it's
disparaging all the
interesting if
college
you
people, but
I mentioned earlier how these parts are actually forgings. And to train an operator to become really skilled at running that forging machine, it's called heading equipment for us, but it takes them about 2 years until we're ready to turn them loose and let them just go run the parts on their own. So there is definitely a skills gap that needs to be addressed throughout the
yeah,
industry.
this is separate, but it speaks to the labor problem. Jim Farley from Ford Motor Company was just out. I think he said there's 6,000 mechanics jobs in his dealerships. By the way, that's Chris Farley's his cousin. 6,000 openings. And who wants to be a wrench? Those are great jobs. Those are very well paid jobs. I remember many years ago when I was still in automotive, going to a meeting where they rolled out what this pays and what they were looking for. They're not looking for backyard mechanics. They are extremely well-paid professionals. And I think we got it in our head somewhere along the line. No, kid, you got to go off to college so you can sell insurance. And some number of them needed to go into these jobs that are now in great demand. We need those people.
Yeah, there's definitely a skill set involved, and it's something that for the right people, they can make a career out of it.
Yep. And so we have capacity problems, or you guys have capacity problems looking for, so you're always looking for new companies, but I suspect getting in on your roster isn't easy.
We are always chasing capacity, yeah, wherever that might be. And a lot of the facilities in the US and in Europe, which is where the bulk of this hardware is produced today, they're so full. So now we're starting to look in India and in China and seeing what capacity is out there. But it's tricky because we need to make sure that the quality is still there as well.
You have to train them too, and that's a trick.
These are typically years in development, not a few weeks or a few
Yeah.
months.
When you're working with India or China or even Europe, you guys are do you run into security issues with some of this stuff also?
Yeah, for military stuff, yeah, we don't include China, India on military stuff. Yeah, but commercial we would.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is again speaks to the difficulty of making these purchasing decisions. This is not something for the faint of heart. This is very difficult, but difficult
There's a
work.
lot. There's a lot to it. Yeah, there's a lot of requirements that we need to make sure that we adhere to for all of our customers, and not every customer is the same. So what works for one customer may not work for another customer, and so that becomes part of the challenge of making sure we purchase from the right source.
Yep. And speak about the tariffs. What has that done to your business?
Yeah, that's really created quite the challenge for us, both logistically and financially. Interestingly, it hasn't changed our strategy in terms of who we purchase from, but it has gotten us to think about how do we logistically get the parts from whoever's making it to whoever our customer is, especially when that customer is not in the US. So if I'm making the parts in Europe, but my customer happens to be in China, there's no reason to bring those parts into the US and face a tariff. But we weren't set up to do that when this all happened. So we had to react very quickly to be able to set up a warehouse someplace that could handle the volume we're talking about to go through there to then get on to our customer. I think one of the interesting things that this whole tariff issue brought up is, first of all, we're trying to get up to speed and become experts on tariffs as quickly as we can. But it's a daunting process to really understand, and it's changing. And so one of the things we needed to do is we actually changed customs brokers because we found that who we were using might have worked in the past, but with this ever-changing tariffs, we had to have someone that was really an expert. And so switching to a customs broker that was a real expert in the industry was a huge help for us.
Yeah, I've run into it. I don't do any consulting anymore, but the last time I did, I think it was before COVID. I was just advising a European company that sold retail stuff here and in Canada. And I remember talking to the owner and he said, yeah, we need to ship it separately to Canada. And I was like, I don't know. And then he sent me the tariff information. I was like, for some reason they could send it there cheaper than they could sell it to us. And I was like, why in the world is this going on? And he goes, Joe, I sell all over Europe. And he goes, we have the European Union. It doesn't have, every country has their own unique requirements in terms of labeling, in terms of Fed regs. And I was like, God almighty. So you touched on, do you have customers worldwide?
We do. We do. We have offices all over the world as well. And so we try to give them local support to our customers in whatever region that they're in. So we have offices in China, we have offices in Australia, in Europe, in India, and so forth. Yeah.
And so you're constantly testing these parts. Do you also do audit plants, or is that part of the work you guys
So
are
the
doing?
manufacturers' facilities, yeah, they're the ones that do the testing. We audit what their results are, and then we make sure that they meet the demand of the requirements of that part.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very tricky thing to be in because you have exacting standards and you need to test. And then I'm sure you're saying there's a capacity issue. So you're like, faster, more. And at the same time, don't you dare deviate on the quality that and the expectations we gave you.
Quality has to be a given. There's no ticket to entry if you can't make the quality right. Quality has to be a given in our industry.
Oh, again, anybody who's been on a plane, which virtually everyone listening to this podcast, do you ever want to get on a plane where you go, well, there's a ticking sound here or a rattling? It's horrifying that we just absolutely positively can't have it. So when companies come to you, what was going wrong? So you guys have a sales team, global sales team. They're calling, they're saying, hey, Joe, please work with us. Call me back. I sent you an email, met you at a conference. What is the final straw where they go, I am going to call Bob and his team back because
Yeah, so typically it's interesting. So we have customers out there, and we think of them as two different types. One is they want to do everything on their own. They're not what we call distribution friendly. They don't want to be involved working with distributors. They just want to do everything themselves. And then you have most of the rest of them who are like, oh my God, we love distributors because they solve our problems for us. They keep the parts in stock, and they're going to have them when I go to reach for them. The parts will always be there. And those are the customers that we do really well with. And so it usually gets to the point where we have a competitor maybe who wasn't doing it as well, didn't put the customer first, didn't have the parts in stock when the customer needed it for whatever variety of reasons, right? And so they just get to the point where I'm going to put this back out on the market. I'm going to test the waters. I'm going to see who else is out there. And then they discover FDH. And they discover that we're a very customer-driven, customer-first focused company. And so once they start working with us and they realize a lot of us came from a lot of these other companies that are out there, and we've assembled the best team in the industry to go solve this problem for our customers and make sure that, yes, we're going to have those parts on the shelf when you go to reach for them, because we understand what happens if it's not there. Your production line stops.
yeah, I think a lot of people listen to my podcast are logistics people. And a lot of them have heard this thing where it's like, you're just the middleman. I can get a truck without you. I don't need you. I'll go right around you and get a truck. And by the way, that can work. 60, I think 70 some percent of shippers go directly to carriers. But some number say, I have that 3PL or that freight broker in the middle, and I don't call them a middleman because they're adding value. If you don't add value, you don't get to be in the middle.
We are an extension of our customers' supply chain. And again, we like to say that we're simplifying the supply chain because we understand these customers, they don't want to deal with a whole lot of different suppliers. They just want to go to one person or two or three people. And so we're trying to simplify that for them. And we're being that buffer in between. Because if you think about it, when they're putting out a requirement, those requirements change. So they think they needed 1,000 pieces. All of a sudden, they need 1,500 pieces. And the manufacturers can't respond fast enough. So they're making their parts. It's a year into the process. They can't. So you need somebody to own a buffer. And the OEMs don't want to own the buffer. And the manufacturers don't want to own the buffer. And so that's where someone like an FDH Aerospace comes into play, where we are the distributor who will take the inability of the customer to really do accurate forecasting and the inability of our suppliers to make parts on time. And there's a buffer that needs to be held somewhere in between those two.
Yeah, and I know there's people in a second, you're not going to change their mind. Listening to my podcast, I'm going to change their mind, I should say. But the people who say we're not distribution friendly, they don't want to do it. But if you right now told your existing customers, stand up this same capability internally, I don't think that happens in a year or two. I think that's like a decade long.
And it's very expensive.
Yes.
So when we talk about those really high volume parts that our customers buy, absolutely right. They don't need someone like us being in the middle. They can get a really good price from the guys who make them, right? But that really long tail, when they only need 100 pieces, but I'm going out and buying 10,000 because someone else in the industry also uses that same part, I pass that savings along to my customer. So I can actually sell them a part cheaper, less expensive than if they went directly to the manufacturer, because they need so few pieces. They're going to get charged a lot more.
I'm assuming that the aerospace companies are now saying we're going to use a fastener that FDH Aero already carries for our new production. So they
I wish it was that simple.
So the reason I say that is because what you just mentioned is I only need 100 this year. I don't want to have to start carrying thousands of these parts that are all very expensive.
Yeah, but remember, the airplanes are designed by engineers, and the engineers want what the engineers want. And if they want that particular bolt or that particular nut or that particular collar, that's what's going on. Yeah.
I worked on an engineering program. I can say the car now. It's the Jeep Liberty. I wasn't really doing much on it, but the program management team there said, we always make all of these custom fasteners. We're not going to do it. And so I think they said outside of powertrain, which is going to have unique requirements, you have to use either this small, medium, or large fastener. And so they said, each engineer, if you really truly need something other than small, medium, or large, you come to us and convince us. We're not stupid. Convince us. Now, they did end up with fewer. I don't think they ended up with 3, but I always remember thinking every engineer shows up and says, Bob, Joe, you don't understand. This is a very unique situation. The other planes had wings too. I don't know. Engineers are going to do what engineers
It's really not. Yeah. Yeah.
But
engineers love to design. So yeah, that's how we ended up with this huge proliferation of fasteners in our industry.
And, and so that's innovation, and that we want the engineers to engineer. So if somebody's listening and they say, yes, this is exactly what I need, what does it look like to start working with an FDH Aero?
Yeah, so our sales teams are working with many of these OEMs and their subs right now. Once they make the switch and say, okay, FDH, yeah, I'm going to work with you. What we do is we do a handoff between that sales team and my team that actually buys the parts, and we just start buying parts and we get them into our system. And then once we get to know the customer's true requirements, then we can become as smart, if not smarter than them, and making sure that, because they might tell us, oh, I use 1,000 a year. And we find out, no, they're actually using twice that. Thank God we bought 5,000 when I went out and bought them, right? And so we can be really smart and understand and anticipate what is going to be their needs before they even know and before they even come out to pick that part. We already have it on the shelf ready to go for them.
So is the pitch you guys have, is it, hey, we're going to ensure you get the quality and the safety and all the engineering requirements, customer requirements all met? It's that, and is it also cost savings to work with you guys?
Cost savings and availability. Yeah, exactly. So again, that quality, that has to be a given. All of us who are in this space doing what we do, we all have the same kind of quality. We're all dealing with the same manufacturers that are making the same parts for all of us. But who make sure that they place that order on time, they follow up on that order, they make sure that manufacturer is going to deliver it on time, or at the very least, don't ever let you have a stock out, right? Because that's what'll kill our customers, is if they go to reach for that part and it's not there.
Oh yeah, and the idea, just told you I was on a plane to Europe that was a couple hours late. What if what if the part they needed wasn't available? Now it's not a couple hours late. Now it's go home.
That becomes an AOG situation, which is the highest criticality in our industry, an aircraft on the ground actually waiting for a part. And so I'm sure there's someone at the airline calling around saying, who has this part in stock? Yeah, and you find it. because somebody likely has it somewhere. You just got to go figure out who it is and how quickly can I get it
Yep.
to the line.
So the big three, that obviously the quality's got to be there. He's got to meet these very exacting standards, probably the most exacting standards in any type of manufacturing. The availability, that obviously is super important. And you said you bring savings. Is that savings because you guys are buying at volume, or is it because you're also doing the carrying of inventory?
Oh, I'm sure there's a savings to the customer for carrying cost as well, but the customer typically looks at it in terms of a unit cost. And so our unit cost can be lower than theirs because we are buying these parts in bulk. And we buy them in bulk because many of these customers use the same parts. So there is some standardization across the industry, especially if they're
Not as
using what we
much as
call
you
industry
want.
standard parts. Not as much as we'd love to have, but there's enough of it that when it comes to those types of parts, we can give them a cost savings because we're buying the parts in such large volumes. And then when you look at the overall package, overall we can give them a cost savings because we do so well on those industry standard parts that, yeah, maybe we didn't do quite as well on your specific part that you're buying a lot of. Maybe you could get it slightly better, but now I'm going to be handling it for you and you don't have to worry about storage, where you're going to put it, how quickly do you need to get it in, all that stuff. We manage that for them.
No, I love this. I always say on my podcast, regardless of what we're talking about in the logistics or supply chain space, is that you want great partners. And I always say, and I don't even think I have to say it in your case, is you're not dating, you're not engaged, you're getting married to this partner because that is how. So if you're dating someone, they say, I don't feel good on Friday night. You go, maybe we don't do anything. If you're married, you're like, let me take care of you. We're in this together.
Yeah, no, we're definitely in this together. Again, we want to be that extension of our customers' supply chain.
So on the other side of it, there's all these suppliers who make these very exacting parts, and there's not nearly as many as you'd like to be out there. You're developing, auditing, always looking for the next one. What's the advantage for these companies to work with an FDH Aero?
So, one thing you'll find about manufacturers, right? They like to make parts, ship parts, and get paid for parts.
They don't want to sell. They don't want to market.
They don't want to make parts and hold parts and then send them off in really small drips and drabs to their customers. So the manufacturers love working with us distributors because they can make 10,000 pieces and ship us 10,000 pieces and they'll get paid for 10,000 pieces. Instead of if they work directly with a large OEM, they're going to say they're large. They're going to tell them, hey, I only need 20. Ship me only 20. I don't have room for 5,000. You ship me only 20. And they can do that. Whereas we're going to tell them, no, give me all 5,000. I'll take them. And we're set up to ship in those small quantities. So if you were going to come to our warehouse, you'd see we can ship 7 pieces at a time, 3 pieces at a time, 27, whatever that is the customer needs, we'll send that quantity out to them. So we're built for high volume, lots of shipping, unlike a manufacturer's shipping area, which is, I want to get this whole box out of here and just get it off to my customer. So it's a different model.
And since I do have logistics and transportation people listening, I'm assuming your stuff doesn't travel on just common carrier. There's a higher bar on some of this stuff, I'm assuming.
No, most of it does. It goes through the typical carrier that you love, right? It's the same. It's the same people. The only times you run into a special one is if it's something that's hazardous, like a chemical. Might do something special. Yeah, might go a special way, or
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. By the way, one other thing I was just thinking about is in terms of the vendors selling to you. I know you guys are a big company, but you're selling to the biggest companies. And I grew up, and my dad owned an engineering business, and I used to say, when you're dancing with a giant, even when they're happy with you, they still step on you accidentally. When you work with really big companies, it's
Yeah,
hard.
you bring up a great point, Joe, because there are terms and conditions from these very large companies that are quite onerous. And not every manufacturer wants to work with them. And yeah, we have manufacturers who just will refuse to work with some of these larger OEMs because of those T's and C's they just cannot agree to. And so they're working through distribution instead.
Yeah, it's not an easy biz. Anyway, I'm going to summarize what we talked about today, and then I want to get. By the way, I'll make sure I put a link to your LinkedIn profile, link to your website, and the other links you and your go-to-market team give me. I make sure I put those in the show notes. Anyway, I'm talking to my friend Bob Loycano, and we're talking about how FDH Aero is simplifying the aerospace supply chain. And you guys are first and foremost a distributor, but you're distributing the really difficult forging fasteners, and I'm assuming other stuff closely related to that. Very difficult parts to put together. And there's all sorts of issues like the rest of our supply chains. There's a lack of manufacturing capacity. There's the tariffs. There's not as much capacity overseas. I guess you guys are probably always working on that. And the challenge that the big companies are running into is they have super high quality standards. And it's not just quality, it's the manufacturing standards and the testing that it has to undergo. They also don't want to have to deal with availability issues or stock out. They can't. As you said,
They can't afford to.
airplane on the ground is from a manufacturing background in automotive, and they used to be like, if you shut the plant down for 1 minute, they scream that you cost them $1 million, and they threaten to kill you. I can imagine it's even worse with an airplane. God forbid if it's a military airplane. I mean,
Yeah, there's just no tolerance for that,
yes.
right? Yep.
And so you're very expensive parts and parts that you don't necessarily know how many you're going to need. You don't want to have to carry any excess capacity, excess inventory for, because it's wildly expensive. And God forbid it goes bad on your shelf, right? FDH Aero and Bob's team knows that they're going to sell that same across many organizations, and everybody ends up with a better deal as a result. And for the vendors, you don't have to be in sales and marketing mode. You can do what you do best, which is build great parts and test those great parts and get Bob's approval and sell to the biggest companies in the world that you might otherwise never get a chance to sell to. I'm assuming it wouldn't be easy for the average small fastener company or large fastener company to get. Do you even call them fastener companies? I don't know what the right term is.
Yeah, hardware companies, yeah, to get approvals. Yeah, it
It's not
is.
easy to get in at a big company, and you got to jump through a lot of burning hoops, and it might not be worth it. Much better to jump through Bob's burning hoops.
We have relationships with these customers, and when they trust us, we're a partner with them. And so when I bring them a new supplier, they listen and they want to work with us, especially if it's someone that they understand will lower their
Yeah,
cost.
you show up with Bob's arm around you, and you're all set. You're in. Anyway, Bob, put a big old bow on this one. Final thoughts on the topic.
Yeah, let me just summarize a little bit more about FDH Aero and who we are, if I could. So we are a leading independent supply chain partner. I think it's important that we're independent. We represent all of the different manufacturers out there, delivering a broad portfolio of solutions, including electronics, hardware, consumables, along with those value-added services we talked about, such as kitting and vendor-managed inventory. And all that is to drive innovation and efficiency across our aerospace and defense supply chain. So essentially, we're one company with 4 divisions serving that entire aircraft life cycle. This divisional model, it centralizes planning and sales, streamlining that execution, improving inventory utilization, enabling faster platforming, onboarding, and stronger customer support in the end. So we're growing globally. We have active regional expansions. Our centers of excellence are in US and Europe with growing footprints in China, Singapore, and India. We're well positioned as a global but regionally present partner, 15 locations and 1,500 employees positioned around the world. These regional teams we have, they're empowered to make decisions on the ground, providing faster answers and a more tailored service to our customers. Our sustained growth is driven by that focused set of consistent performance metrics, starting with on-time delivery, making sure those parts are there when our customer needs it. Our leadership team, led by our CEO, Ian Walsh, we're all committed to achieving this best-in-class performance. We deliver unmatched customer service, strategic inventory investment, and smart, practical, innovative solutions. We have a relentless focus on operational excellence. We perform at the highest levels, continuously improving our processes, our systems, and scalability to enhance those customer service levels. Our financial strength fuels our growth. We have a healthy balance sheet, consistent cash flow. We have the parts where and when our customers need them to keep those aircraft flying and their business growing. And we like to call that a global reach with local support. So we have coverage in all the Americas, Europe, Asia, Australia, single points of contact connecting our customers to our global parts catalog. We make investments in parts inventories and have supplier relationships that benefit our customers, with an efficient, optimized supply chain. So simply put, FDH Aero is designed to deliver.
I love it. I love it. So what conferences will you and the fine folks from FDH Aero be at?
Yeah, so actually this week we're at MRO Americas in Orlando. We have a team there. And in July, we'll all be at the Farnborough Air Show, and looking forward to that.
Where's that at?
It's just outside of London. So that's the big air show for this year. Yep.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I have a friend who's going to be there. So, yeah, very nice. What I'll do, I'll make sure I put a link to your LinkedIn profile, link to your website, any of the links you and your go-to-market team give me. If you guys have any sort of videos or blog posts or anything like that, we'll put those in the show notes.
Yep. Great. Thank you so much, Joe. Really appreciate you having me on today.
I appreciate you taking us through an area of supply chain that is so critically important, but I don't think most of us have ever really been exposed to it. There's always a corner of supply chain that you go, oh, I get it now, but I didn't know it even existed 10 minutes ago. So thank you so much for educating us.
Thank you, Joe. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today.
Yep. Thank you. And thank all of you for listening to my show. Your support's very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward. You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.